Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of India's World with me, Frank Razan Pereira. Pakistan's currency hit an all-time record low against the dollar less than a week after the government reached an agreement with the International Monetary Fund for a $6 billion bailout. The Pakistani rupee slid as much as 3.4% on May 16th before partially recovering to 145 rupees against the dollar and then further slid on Friday to 150 rupees per dollar. The currency has plunged more than 20% over the last year as the country faced slowing economic growth, declining foreign exchange reserves, and increasing budget and trade deficits. The central bank devalued the rupee and raised interest rates in 2018 as it sought to contain the financial blowouts from the country's economic challenges. The long-delayed IMF package intended to shore up Pakistan's public finances and strengthen its economy would be Pakistan's 13th bailout since the late 1980s. The preliminary accord clinched with the IMF must still be approved by the fund's board of directors in Washington. On this edition of India's World, we will analyze Pakistan's crumbling economy. Joining me on the program today are Vivek, Katju, former ambassador, A.K. Bhattacharya, editorial director of the Business Standard, and Major General P.K. Chakravarti, retired defense expert. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of India's World. Ambassador, I'd like to begin the program with you. First, let's try and put into perspective, the state of Pakistan's economy.
I think it's, as you rightly said, in very, very deep trouble. But this is not a transient phenomena. It's not something that it's maladjusted, and with the IMF support, as with the earlier financial supports from Saudi Arabia, UAE, or money coming, which may come from China, the economy will get stabilized. The recent difficulties are symptomatic of a deep malaise in the economy, which is structural in nature. And it is not purely economic. It is political economy that needs a basic restructuring. That would mean a restructuring also of the Pakistan state. And that is a nettle no one is willing to grasp in Pakistan. I read today that this will be the 13th bailout after 1989, which means in 30 years they've gone to the IMF 13 times. IMF bailouts are for temporary in nature to give the economy a certain pause to enable it to correct itself. That is not happening because the Pakistanis, regrettably, on account of their enduring animus and hostility towards India, are just not willing to take sane decisions required to bring Pakistan to a correct course. That, unfortunately, is the situation.
All right. Mr. Bhattacharya, I'd like to bring you into the picture now. What are the kind of reforms that Pakistan needs to undertake if they have to bring about some kind of a turnaround as far as their economy is concerned? What steps do you think the Prime Minister needs to take?
Well, there are quite a few steps that it needs to take. But let me set the entire controversy or the development in Pakistan today in a proper economic context. Its growth is dwindling, is coming down every year. It was 5.5% last year, it is now 4%. Its indebtedness is rising. Its external debt is almost 29 to 30% of its GDP. Its inflation is just spiking. Its forex reserves is as low a level as $8 billion. So if you look at all that has happened, so Pakistan economy is looking for a kind of both external stimulus as well as an internal stimulus. Now, it is not just a question of its balance of payments problem, but it is also a problem of internal fiscal discipline. So what they have done by going to IMF is to address its balance of payments problem. And what I understand the IMF will expect it is to not only look at its external balances problem and come up with solutions, but also look at the internal, the fiscal and discipline issues also. So I understand the steps that are on the table right now are very, very tough. One, there is a move that the interest rates will have to be raised again. Number two, tariffs on power and gas will have to be raised, but I believe they have to be raised in a manner that as much as 40% of the Pakistani people and the entities don't get affected. And number three, they have to reduce their non-developmental expenditure. In a sense, that probably my co-panelists will explain it in a little more detail, but non-development expenditure is any expenditure which is not going for social reasons. So there is a plan, there has to be a plan to improve that social expenditure.
Sure.
Now, like in all economies, like India itself saw in 1991, that when IMF gives this bailout and the country accepts it and also accepts those conditionalities, now there is a natural political pushback because these are all tough measures. When you raise interest rates, domestic industry is unhappy. When you raise tariffs, the domestic industry and the people are unhappy. So yes, Pakistan may get the money, it might boost its forex reserve for some time, but if it doesn't have the political courage and the political stability to carry on with these tough measures that have to be taken to fix the problems, my sense is that this problem is not going to go away in a hurry.
Sure.
So even if you have got $6 billion of IMF money, even if you have got around $9 billion of money from the Chinese, even if you may have got another $2 billion from World Bank and the ADB, but unless you take those tough decisions to improve the business environment, to improve the transparency, to protect social spending, and to strengthen institutions. Now, these are all very, very important challenges. The big doubt I have in my mind is whether the Pakistan state, currently under the leadership of Imran Khan, has the ability to take on these tough measures and take full advantage of the IMF bailout measures.
Sure. You know, history has shown us, General, that conditions are never really met as far as Pakistan is concerned. Why should anything be different this time around?
Well, I think I fully agree with firstly you and also both the other panelists. Let me go a little back. Before the 65 war, Pakistan was an example of how a state in this region can be really looking after itself, getting everything from the United States, having a good economy. And I still remember President Ayub's, because I've done a lot of research, reluctance to go to war against India. And Bhutto, persuading Ayub that you should look at it, and this is an opportunity post-62. And since then, the downturn starts. And very rightly, I did a base means capabilities analysis for the government of India for Pakistan. And everything which they have said, you can give a bailout package, you can give anything. But what are these basic issues? Let's come to it. The first issue for any economy to succeed is the climate which must be there, which he so nicely brought out. There must be a climate in which a political stability is there. There is a climate in which foreign FDIs can come in. So FDIs is, I think, $2 billion. I just went through. Look at India today, we got $39 billion coming in. I mean, say, no foreign company wants to invest. Third thing is, there must be the people who are the institutions, they need to be protected. I'm afraid, again, I'm getting Bhutto. Bhutto came and, he really made, I think, the bureaucracy and the foreign service were very good in Pakistan. But again, when I go into the research, I find that they could be transferred, they could be posted out, their security was affected. Lastly, institutions which safeguard themselves, they are not existing. And lastly, I come to the most important organization, as he brought out, the armed forces. Now, it's a paradox, if I may put it. Firstly, to consider India to be an enemy. It's a different thing that Pakistan has the right to form its own views about strategy, policy, strategic depth. I do not want to comment. Just look at the size of the army. There are 9 corps for a country like India. 9 corps. A total strength of 550,000 of the armed forces. Now, if 550,000 have to be given their pay, their pension, I'm not looking at the weapons coming in. Then you look at the imports of weapons. I mean, I don't want to come out with the figures because then it will look like more of a statistical exercise. And the third thing which I want to bring out is, today, you're also encouraging other people to fight at various places. Afghanistan, I mean, say you in many other countries, whether it's, I don't want to name them because there's out of lack of evidence, but you're encouraging this movement of what you call it, encouraging people through your intelligence organizations, which have the discretion to spend any amount of money at any time without coming into the ledger books.
Sure.
Now, see, today, let's say the ISPR and the ISI, their budgets are concerned. I remember meeting Ambassador Hussein Haqqani. Of course, Hussein Haqqani is somebody whom the Pakistani establishment doesn't like. He said, if you go to the ISI and look at it, there is a block which is known as the M block. And the M stands for media. And the amount they spend on psychological warfare is something which is colossal. So when that money is being spent, how will Pakistan get, you can give $6 billion from here, $6 billion from Saudi Arabia, a few billions from UAE, a few billions from China, you can keep adding the money. But today, unless controls are brought in, who brings in the control? The auditors, the institutions, the economists, they come in. And lastly, the army has to be brought under control.
That's the point that I want to take forward. Ambassador, despite all of that has been discussed over the last 10 minutes, why is it that organizations or funds like the IMF, World Bank and so on continue to dole out cash to Pakistan?
A few reasons. The first is Pakistan is a big state. It is dwarfed by India, it's dwarfed by China. But if you look at it objectively, it's a country with what? About 207 to 210 million population. It's a huge size. It has reserves, resources. So objectively, it's a big state. It's a state with nuclear weapons. And no one wants a state with nuclear weapons to go the way of Somalia or Venezuela. We want a certain minimum stability there. And that is why I have no doubt in my mind that no country, no major power, including the United States, will allow Pakistan to go down under. So, for the last 2 to 3 decades, it has been kept on a drip. And that drip will not be taken away. It also has a very large informal economic sector, which is vibrant. So here you have a classic contradiction, that the economic informal sector keeps the country going. Money keeps flowing in, and that's why partly because of that it is under FATF controls, that they are saying that this money which comes in, which is sloshing around, over which the state has no control, goes into all kinds of directions, including terrorism, for terrorism. And the Pakistan state must get its house in order economically to prevent this. The problem is that the army's strategic objectives clash with this kind of regulation, because it wants to use these forces, these groups, which are sustained through these informal flows, for its objectives against us and in the neighborhood, in Afghanistan and elsewhere. Hence, I don't see any radical change happening, notwithstanding Imran Khan's noises. He's warned his people that you must tighten your belts, etc. The elite is not willing to do much in this direction. And the army, even though Bajwa makes occasional noises for the modernization of the country, I doubt whether the army is willing to drink that poisoned cup, which will require it to examine its foundational principles wholesale. And till that, I'm afraid these periodic economic crises will come, and then it will stabilize at a lower level, at a kind of a base level. But I don't see much hope.
Okay. Yes, Mr.
Yeah, I want to add to what Mr. Katju very rightly pointed out. The Pakistan indeed poses a major challenge to the world community, and I want to add here that it is also strategically placed and geographically as well as placed in an area where it can actually be the center point of the international economic diplomacy that is now going on. Now, you cannot exclude right now what is happening vis-a-vis China's Belt and Road Initiative and its foray into Pakistan, and China's attempt to use Pakistan as a kind of a counter strategy to the global, the US-led global economies attempt to in a sense put pressure on Pakistan to behave more responsibly. So if IMF gives it money, it is also to try to send out a message that, listen, we have not yet abandoned you to the Chinese
Scheme of things.
Now, and Pakistan, I must say, has played this card very well. And let me also add here that where India has not made the necessary headway in making sure that Pakistan's listing under FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, from a grey list to a blacklist. Now, I think that was expected after Azhar Massoud's naming under the UN
terrorist.
thing as a terrorist. But I think if that had been done, if India had achieved the FATF listing of Pakistan from grey into black, my sense is this loan of IMF would have been, in a sense, not forthcoming as easily as it has happened.
Maybe there would have been some more conditions.
Some more conditions, which in the long run would have been in the interest of Pakistan and which would probably help Pakistan recover from its current crisis. Otherwise, there is no reason. What you are seeing right now in Pakistan is that Pakistan's inflation is going to rise even more.
Right.
Pakistan's rupee will devalue further. There are estimates which that it may go up even to 200 rupees per US dollar. Why? Because Pakistan's exports for the last 5 years have been declining year on year. Imports are rising.
Right.
So where does the money come from? So Pakistan is in real deep trouble with a $300 billion economy, with 197 million people, with a growth rate of less than 4%, with an inflation rate of 9%. No, it's a heady disaster that is waiting to take place in Pakistan.
Sure. Yes, Ambassador, you wanted to add
I
something?
think on the export front, our colleague is absolutely right. I mean, the economy is, the exports are dependent 60% on the cotton crop.
Yeah.
This is a dwarfed economy. It's a stunted economy. And in order to become normal, to become a full-fledged sort of manufacturing economy, etc., they've got to change course. They're just not willing. But on the blacklisting under FATF, I really don't know if the Americans and the West want to put such enormous pressure on Pakistan at this stage that its economy gets even further derailed. They always play a very calibrated game. Keep it under pressure, not only for economic reasons, for their political purposes, but not so much pressure that there's rioting in the streets. I think that is a game. And there in the FATF, we have a role to play, but let's not exaggerate our role.
Okay. General?
I think you wanted to ask?
Yeah, absolutely. With the CPEC running into trouble in Pakistan, we saw what happened in Gwadar.
Yeah.
Where does it leave China? Where does it leave the CPEC project?
All right.
And is that going to cause more economic trouble?
Before I come on to CPEC, I want to come to the United States. I think I fully agree. I meet a lot of American officers, and I always find what they are saying. There's a resonance that, particularly the US, you must understand that Pakistan comes under the US Central Command, and India comes under the what you call Indo-Pacific Command. I hope you know the flying time between Tampa, which is the headquarters of Central Command, and Hawaii. It takes 14 hours to fly. I've been telling this to even Senator, Pressler, who had come over here, and he says, well, this is one of the octopuses. So the Central Command, let me tell you today, is sold on Pakistan, as Ambassador Katju has said. And there's a need for it. Because if today America has to exit Afghanistan, if today, there's so many, it is so well geostrategic that you cannot today let it go down. I know so many times I've discussed tactical nuclear weapons of Pakistan and I bring it out. And the Americans say, no, I was in Quetta, I was posted there for 3 years. Believe me, General, the computer tests are valid. Now I'll come on to your question, the CPEC and Gwadar. Well, see, I must say one thing to you. Let's grant you have today you got firstly the Pakistan army, which is a very well trained and a professional army. Well, let's have no doubts about their armed forces. Why they are so, you'd need a separate discussion, and we are dealing with economics. Well, next you got the Chinese themselves. They're going to have 500,000 people in Gwadar. All right, you've got today a lot of Chinese projects coming up in Gilgit-Baltistan, over which we have protested. And PLA is what you call taken a lot of steps in Xinjiang. So as far as the Chinese are concerned, anywhere in Tibet or today, what you call, let us say, carrying out measures which are harsh and rude, which at least sees the short term goes through, will happen. So as far as the CPEC is concerned, it will continue, there will be protests. And how much can we do? We don't have even a direct land link. Whatever we can do, we are doing. Let me put it to you, and I think we are doing it well. How much can we carry our covert actions is a separate discussion by itself.
Sure.
It's a separate discussion.
Yeah, it's a separate discussion, and I don't think
we should not get involved in it. The next thing that I want to say is as far as China's interest is concerned. China's interest in Pakistan is, as I think very clearly brought out by Sir, that you see when you look at it today, when you're getting a land access, both through Myanmar, that is the Kunming, this one, and through what you call Gwadar, I think this is a great way of going out. And China is looking at everything from land, getting into Europe, possibly building tunnels. There may be tunnels even today to link it to Canada, they are saying. So, well, they have the skills. Why? I'll just say why they have the skills. They made a road when they came in 1962 from Bumla to Tawang. Please go even today to Tawang, the road exists. Why? In China, only the coastal portion grows agricultural products. Rest of them have to dig the earth to find something to eat. Now, you know what is under the earth. So they are born civil engineers.
Sure.
So making a road for them, knocking out some elements here and there is maybe a great thing for us, but for them it doesn't matter.
Right. Limited time on the program. Quick closing comments from all my guests. Should India be concerned with the economic situation in Pakistan, Mr. Bhattacharya?
I think India should be concerned. They are a neighboring country. India doesn't have too voluminous trade level with Pakistan directly, although there are a lot of indirect trade that still takes place through either Dubai or through Singapore. But I think India should be worried because for its strategic safety and stability also, you don't need a neighboring country to be economically unstable.
Sure.
So I think it is in our interest that the economic instability in Pakistan, which is a big challenge, does not lead it to a country where it is actually whole thing collapses.
Right.
And second is something which is debatable, whether it is an opportunity for India to explore in various ways, in what way can the gaps that will be created once the IMF loan comes, if there will be some sort of a demand, can that demand be tapped without violating the other principles that are at play with a neighboring country like Pakistan? Is that an opportunity, something that needs to be discussed and debated?
Sure. Ambassador, the best way forward?
Look, there is nothing that India can do to stabilize Pakistan economically. Two, what our colleague has mentioned is the conventional wisdom in India, which we've pursued over the last 7 decades, that an unstable Pakistan is not in our interest. And that argument has been strengthened ever since Pakistan went nuclear. I believe that because we cannot do anything, we shouldn't really be deeply concerned. Besides, if Pakistan is a malignant state, then is the stability of a malignant state in our interest? That is the question that we have to ask.
Sure.
And I think we really got to look at this very deeply. An unstable Pakistan, should we be worried? I mean, there are images that there will be people's flows into India. I think all that is exaggerated. The time has come for us to take a very hard look at a country which defines its very existence in terms of animosity to us.
Okay. And General, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
No, I think I agree with Mr. Katju that firstly, we need to take a very hard look at Pakistan. All right, despite, of course, we do not want them to collapse. But if you think that they're going to have hordes of refugees coming in, all, no way. They're quite, what you call, capable of handling the situation. And then I think we need to take some hard looks, hard issues, some, even if required. I just spoke on another program that we are getting so much equipment and all. And I think we need to call their nuclear bluff, and if required, now not only just send a few aircrafts, if required, carry out land offensives, which teaches them a lesson once for all.
Isn't that a hawkish position, though?
See, India is a regional power. It's an emerging power. There's no question of a hawk or a dove or anybody. Everybody lives in the jungle, and everybody has its place. And we all are in a jungle of the world. The tiger has its place. The frog has its place. Now you have to decide, what is India? Is it what you call a deer? Is it a dove? Is it a hawk? If we are an emerging power. And if today somebody has, as Mr. Katju correctly said, has this capability to constantly, what you call, kill people here and there against the law, I think necessary lessons must be taught. And it's high time we did it.
I would actually like to add that, probably use this opportunity of Pakistan's economic trouble to make sure that the Indian economy is further strengthened, because we need to make sure that the global headwinds that are already affecting many other countries, the Indian economy also needs to be strengthened further to ensure that its rise as an emerging power is that dream is realized.
No, that of course goes without saying. That our economy has to be strengthened.
Our economy has to be
Absolutely.
All right.
Then only we are a tiger, we are a hawk, only when we have the economy. You can't be a hegemon without nothing.
Absolutely. All right. With that, then it's a wrap on this edition of India's World. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. We'd like to hear from you as well. Do share your feedback with us. Our email ID is indiasworld.feedback@gmail.com. You can also tweet to us using our Twitter handles at FRP09 and at Rajya Sabha TV. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.